Tilehurst End podcast by Reading fans for Reading fans.
Hello and welcome to the Tilehurst End weekend preview. This is the big one, the definition of a relegation six-pointer, as Reading host Rotherham United this weekend, with both sides locked on equal points going into the game. My name is Olly Allen, your host for today's show, and I'm pleased to say that I'm joined as ever by the Wokingham paper's Tom Crocker. How's it going, Tom?
Yeah, good, thank you. It feels like this game's been on the horizon for so long. It's strange that it's finally here now, but yeah, it's certainly a big one on Saturday.
We've been talking about it for months, really, and sort of how crucial this game is, and we'll get onto that in just a minute. But a brief point, of course, on that 4-0 defeat to Sheffield United last weekend, which was reviewed in depth actually by Mark Mayo and Dave Handbags-Harris in the main show earlier in the week. So we don't have to go into too much detail on that, fortunately, but do go back and listen to that show if you haven't already. But in terms of going into this Rotherham game, Tom, off the back of that defeat, I mean, what is the best thing for Reading to do in terms of, considering that result? Obviously, do you just put the defeat behind you and sort of try and fully focus on this crucial game, or are there lessons that perhaps need to be learnt from it, so it doesn't happen again? I mean, we'll get onto it in a minute, but I think, the threat of Rotherham certainly isn't as great as the threat of Sheffield United. So how much does it really mean, that defeat, in context of this weekend's game?
I think obviously if they win this weekend, it's pretty much irrelevant in that we said on air last week it's going to be a game that's going to be extremely tough. I think that most people, if not all Reading fans, wouldn't have really fancied anything out of the game, and especially after obviously you go 1-0 down in the first minute, it became pretty clear that it was going to be another one of those afternoons, and obviously it turned out 4-0, which is never a good result on paper to look at. But I think, like you say, if the focus is very much on this weekend and the two games that follow against Ipswich and Wigan, and those are always going to be the three games I think that define what happens to Reading. If you go to Sheffield United and lose 1-0 or 4-0, it still ends up as a defeat. So
you described it as a free hit last weekend.
Well, I think it is, but like I say, even though I think we said don't go there and get heavily beaten is the only thing you don't really want, and so we'll look at it now this weekend and see exactly how it has affected them. But I think that brings into focus even more how important these games are now, and hopefully we'll see some sort of reaction straight from the start this week, and they can put it behind them pretty quickly. Also, I think obviously they lost the 4-1 against Swansea at home, and I think they reacted pretty well to that. If I remember rightly, they played quite well in the few games after that. So hopefully it's just more of a blip. And I think the first, obviously, you let in a goal in the first minute, and the second goal they basically gave it away, and then the game's pretty much over then. So hopefully with a full week to, I think they would have moved on from it pretty quickly and moved on to this game and fancied themselves to do a bit more of a job at home, as they've been fairly decent at home. And I think they can hopefully put it behind them quickly. But like you say, it was a tough trip for all those fans who went up there, I'm sure. And never nice to see the team losing 4-0. But I think everyone will agree in the grand context of the season that the next few games are going to be the bigger ones, I think.
I was going to make a similar point, really, about the response. Obviously, you mentioned that 4-1 defeat to Swansea on New Year's Day. That was followed by a fairly decent performance against Man United, despite losing the game. But I think many people would agree that, we played quite well, and obviously beating Nottingham Forest as well. So hopefully we do get a similar response against Rotherham, because as I said at the top of the show, it is the definition of a six-pointer, really. I mean, a lot of people have had it marked on their calendars for a long, long time, and I wouldn't go quite as far as to say the result would define our season, because we'll still have 12 games to play after it. But I think certainly if you look at the run that Reading have coming up after these Rotherham, Ipswich and Wigan games, I think they face 5 of the top 6 in the final sort of 10 games or so. So games certainly don't get much bigger than this weekend.
No, like I say, it's not all on this week either. I think it is these 3 games. I think after these 3, we'll look at it and see, as obviously they want to get off to the good start this weekend and get the win. And if they do, then they'll be 3 points clear. It should be great, but that can easily, obviously, one game later, you can be back in it again. So it is very much, I think, the 3-game package. Obviously, as players and management, they have to just look at one at a time. But I think we can all, like you say, all the fixtures that are to come afterwards, I think you have to pick up the points now. Otherwise, you're under massive pressure to go away to teams like Sheffield United last week, and you can't have it as a free hit. You need to go there and get points, which it's hard to see it happening based on the fact it hasn't happened for most of the season. So, I think this weekend is a huge game. They're all well aware of it. It's obviously a big game for Rotherham as well, and Rotherham could have obviously come in and ahead of Reading had they not conceded late on last week. So Reading have still got a little bit of a breathing space in terms of they're out of the bottom 3, but it's certainly a massive game. I've seen some people describe it as the biggest game at Medeski since the playoffs, and I'm not sure. It's certainly a massive game. If they lose it, I think confidence-wise will be a big thing as well. It's like I spoke to Jose Gomez today and asked him if it's more of a sort of a mental challenge really this weekend rather than a sort of a footballing challenge. And I think he agreed with that it's down to the players to go out there. He's told them it's the biggest game of the season. It's down to them to go and perform and show that they can do it under this sort of pressure. And it's a big test of character to see whether they can step up to this sort of occasion. And they know if they win all three of the next three, then they'll probably be okay. But yeah, if they lose on Saturday, it's going to put real pressure on them, and they'll be in the bottom three, and they'll be wondering where the next win's going to come from. Because if you can't beat the teams in the bottom three at home, then you're certainly looking a bit dodgy for the rest of the season. So yeah, it's a big test for the players, I think, and I'm sure Jose Gomez will put a side out that's good enough to win the game. It's whether they can rise to the occasion, and hopefully they can at least keep Rotherham out for more than 38 seconds anyway.
I think that mental thing is a key part of it, because I think even Rotherham fans would probably admit that Reading have a better side on paper in terms of the quality of players. I mean, your likes of Nelson Oliveira and Martinez and Miazga, sort of the loanies that have come in. I think Rotherham fans would agree that you wouldn't find those players in their side, but at the same time, it is massively down to whether these players can lift themselves to the occasion. Because I think really that's been Reading's problem for the last 18 months or so, is that they have these players who have played in the Premier League who were supposedly good enough to play towards the top end of the Championship. Many of them were at the club when we got to Wembley 2 years ago, but their big downfall has been this mentality, not winning back-to-back games for so long, and really their heads going down as soon as a goal goes in. I think if you compare that to Rotherham, who's really their main strength this season has been their team spirit and their fighting attitude, and that's what's got them to where they are. I think a lot of people tipped them to really struggle this season, and even though they are towards down the bottom of the league, they're certainly not down by any means. Obviously they're level on points with Reading, so I think that will be a big battle this weekend. But the good news is that the bookmakers do have Reading down as the favourites for this one at 23-20, according to Oddschecker #GambleAware, with Rotherham at 5-2, and the draw is 23-10. I mean, you certainly would say, Tom, that Reading probably are best placed to win this one. I mean, you don't want to be too overconfident, but Rotherham are the only side in the Championship not to win away from home this season, and only Ipswich has scored fewer goals on the road than them as well. Reading's home form, meanwhile, has picked up of late, and we're unbeaten in 3 at Mad Stad. I mean, as I say, it's important not to get too complacent, but there's not much more Reading could want in their favour this weekend.
No, yeah, so Rotherham, like I say, haven't won away from home, and that's probably what the odds are reflecting. They pick up most of their points at home. They have obviously drawn the last 4 games, including a couple on the road, so they are capable of getting points away from home. And yeah, you can't be bad away all season and still have a chance of staying up. So they have picked up some points. It's just they tend to do it at home. But yeah, I think, like you say, on paper, it's something we've been saying. I think possibly every week or every other week for the last 2 years, how Reading have got a good side on paper, and it's just never been able to string it together consistently, and that's obviously been the problem. And yeah, as long as they've got some of these players in their teams, I'm sure a lot of fans will look at it, or sort of punters from outside will look at it and think Reading should be winning the game. But we've seen it so often that, like you say, it is down to character and mentality. And Rotherham have got a fighting spirit in that team, and a lot of them probably got promoted together last season. They've stuck together. Obviously, they went down, came back up, and a lot of those players are still there, I think, and the manager. So they've got that going for them, and they've managed to build up that sort of team spirit, which is quite often so much more important in this, especially in this league as well, than the individual players on the day. But hopefully, like you say, Reading at home have looked a little bit better. They obviously weren't great, particularly against Blackburn, but got the late win and showed they can win some games again. And they obviously, that Sheffield United defeat was first defeat in 5, I think it was, wasn't it? So they've been playing okay recently, picking up results. So hopefully back at home, I think they'll have to fancy that they can do it. I'm sure there'll be a good crowd in, and it's going to be down to, I think we say it quite often again, but how they start the game, and if they can try and assert themselves on the game early on rather than make it into a scrappy affair, then that will suit them a lot better. But I'm sure Rotherham will come and make it extremely difficult, and it's down to Reading to stand up to the physical battle as much as anything, I think.
That's what I was going to mention, actually, because I think one thing we will have to look out for is set pieces. Rotherham have scored 18 goals from set pieces this season, including penalties, which is 42% of their total goal tally in the Championship of 33. Only Blackburn, Aston Villa, Wigan and Bolton have had more of a reliance on set pieces for their goals so far this season. Rotherham have also won the most aerial duels in the Championship this season, at 34.2 duels won per game. However, they do rank bottom in the league for pass success rate, and third bottom for average possession per game. All those stats from whoscored.com, but they're very much the opposite of Reading under Jose Gomez, and it could well be an interesting battle of styles this weekend, with Reading having to be wary of their aerial threat.
Yeah, that's something that they've touched on today at the press conference. Jose Gomez was saying the players in his team simply aren't built to play like Rotherham or Millwall are, and they have to try and play their way out of trouble, which obviously we saw last week how that can go wrong. But that's the qualities they've got from these players in the squad, and that's what they've got to work with. I think they've, like you say, with Miazga and with Oliveira, they do have that physical threat a bit more now, and they are able maybe to stand up to it a little bit better. But I think the game back at Rotherham, obviously, I think Rotherham scored from a set piece, wasn't it, right at the end there as well. So that'll be the fear of Reading 1-0 going in the last few minutes. I don't think anyone will be overly confident of them seeing out if Rotherham suddenly get a corner or something. So yeah, they're going to have to be wary of that for the full 90 minutes. It's going to be a threat that will be there for the whole game. Rotherham will no doubt play to it, and they'll look at Reading's defence and probably fancy they can get a goal against them from that route, and you don't really tend to see at the other end Reading scoring too many from corners or anything like that. I can't really remember them doing it too often. So it's a clash of styles, and Reading will no doubt have a lot of the ball, as they have done in a lot of these games. It's whether they can, what they can do with it really. Obviously they've got a striker now in Oliveira, like we said last week, who can score goals, and when you've got him in your team, you'll always fancy he'll get a couple of chances, and hopefully he's on form, and Reading, the defenders at the back can stand up to the direct style that Rotherham may well bring into play, and just stand up to it physically and mentally stay concentrated. I think that'll be the thing. If they switch off from a set piece, as can happen so easily, then the chances are they'll let one in, and then it'll be a not particularly pleasant atmosphere maybe. But it's like you say, it's certainly building up for a massive game. Both sides are going to come into it feeling their style can get the job done, and it's going to be an intriguing one to watch, I think.
Certainly on that possession point, I mean, it is definitely, not how much you have and certainly what you do with it. I think Reading had a lot more possession than Sheffield United last weekend, and obviously ended up losing 4-0. So it's definitely about what you can do with it rather than how much you have. But it's now time to delve a little bit deeper into all things Rotherham in the View from a Town End, the part of the show where we get the thoughts of an opposing fan.
The View from the Town End. What the opposition think.
View from the Town End time now, and is Reading host Rotherham United on Saturday this week. I'm joined by Miller's fan Richard Wilson. How's it going, Richard?
Hello, yeah, very well, thanks, Ollie.
Doesn't seem like too long ago since we first spoke, of course, before that first meeting. Joe Mattock scoring the late equaliser in that 1-1 draw back in December. Since then, actually, I think both sides have fairly similar fortunes, or fairly similarly bad fortunes. I think we've won just twice in the 11 games since, and you guys have won just once in the 11 games since. What's gone wrong for Rotherham this season?
Yeah, I just think it's been a little bit of naivety trying to close out games. We've drawn far too often. We've had plenty of good opportunities to win games. I can, think of a few occasions where I've conceded in sort of the last 10 minutes, and without it being a lack of an issue of sort of bottle or fitness, I just think we've struggled to close out games where we've only been winning by perhaps one goal. And we have found it difficult adapting to this league again, but I think the fans are still relatively hopeful. And I think we're going to Reading a little bit disheartened after the events on Saturday against Sheffield Wednesday, but certainly not too dispirited and thinking that we're out of it yet.
That equaliser for Wednesday coming in the 100th minute or the 10th minute of stoppage time last weekend, but I think the whole of Reading probably breathed a huge sigh of relief when that goal went in. But it was your fourth draw in a row. Is that sort of a sign that the team is becoming a little bit harder to beat and sort of still has got that spirit and that fight needed in the relegation battle?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we had a bit of a dodgy spell sort of early January. But we seem to have a system that everyone seems happy with. Yeah. There seems to be a bit more of a balanced 11. I think the manager and fans know what the best 11 is now, which is something we've perhaps not had, for most of the season. We seem to actually have options on the bench now, perhaps not as many as we'd like after a fairly quiet January, but when everyone's fit, I think we could give anyone a game, especially at home. And there's been signs. I mean, we played really well on Saturday against Wednesday. I think we had 25 shots at goal. In the second half against Hull, we came back from 2-0 down and we looked much the best of the two sides.
Yeah.
So there's signs that, we're doing okay. And I think as some of our results show, we can be a match for anyone on our day.
Rotherham are the only team in the Championship this season without an away win to their name, obviously, with the weekend's game coming up in the Medeski. Does that concern you a little bit?
Yeah, of course it does, yeah. Without a win in 41 Championship away games, if you include the last time we were in this league. So it's, it must hit the players a little bit. I think a lot of the squad were there during that last Championship season, so it will be in their minds. We've managed some decent results away from home. We gave Norwich a game for a long time. We were only beaten 2-0 at Leeds. We've drawn at Middlesbrough. Only lost again late on against Forest away from home, that I remember. So I think with how we set up, we do make it difficult for teams to, give us a bit of a hammering, but I'd be lying if it wasn't in the minds of fans and players, I would imagine, every time we do play away from home, especially compared to our home record, where I think we've only lost 4 times in the league so far.
I think for me, this weekend's fixture very much feels like, sort of a definition of a 6-pointer, really. I think it's definitely one of the most important games of our season so far. I think, obviously, if there is a winner, that could go a long way to deciding sort of who stays up come the end of the season. Is there a similar sort of feeling of importance within the Rotherham camp?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a game that Rotherham fans have had marked on their calendar for quite a while as being potentially season defining. Obviously the game on Saturday was sort of seen as a 2-game spell for us, a local derby at home, and then perhaps our, biggest relegation rivals away from home. It's definitely one that Rotherham fans have been nervously anticipating, but I'm sure Reading will feel the same, being the home side, but I think both teams have to look at it as quite winnable.
Yeah.
Both sides do struggle to win, and I think we've got a bit of a nightmare running, to be honest. We've got you guys, obviously, this weekend, and then I think Blackburn at home, but after that, I don't think we play anyone in the bottom half until the end of the season. So just to have a bit of momentum and a confidence boost going into that would be pretty key for us.
I think that's quite similar to us, actually. I think obviously we've got you guys this weekend, and then we've got Ipswich and Wigan, but then beyond that, we've got a couple of really tough games. I think Leeds, Norwich, West Brom, Bristol City all coming up still for Reading. So I think, I'd agree. I think for both sides, this game really does seem incredibly important. What did you make of Reading back in December? Have you seen much of us since then? Obviously, I suppose being so close to the table, you might keep, sort of half an eye on our form.
Yep, definitely. I thought Reading looked a good footballing side against us at the New York. Had most of the ball. You could tell that got 2 or 3 players who are probably better than where they should be in the league at the moment. As for Reading's results lately, obviously be keeping an eye on them alongside Bolton and Ipswich, and I suppose Wigan and Millwall as well, who are just above the pair of us.
Yeah.
I'm expecting a really difficult game. I'm not expecting us to have much of the ball, but hopeful that we can utilise what we have in terms of set pieces, winning second balls, and just doing what we do and working very hard.
Who should Reading fans look out for at the weekend? Who might be the key player for Rotherham against Reading?
Yeah, it's an obvious one, but Michael Smith is pretty important to us. He gave Hull and Wednesday quite a lot of issues in the last week or so. What you see is what you get with him. He's very physical. I think centre-backs know they've been in a bit of a battle with him. Will Vaux's captain, he's a very good central midfielder. I think teams in the top half of the league are looking at him, if rumours are to be believed. And Semi Ajayi, who has been at centre-back for most of the season, but has just been used as a defensive midfielder in recent weeks and has been a bit of a revelation there. He's extremely good at breaking up play, and he scored a screamer against Leeds a few weeks ago as well, which I don't think many of us think he quite had in his locker.
Finally then, Richard, how do you see the game panning out at the weekend? Can I get a score prediction there for this one?
Yeah, I'll go with a 1-1 draw, just like in the reverse fixture. A gutsy 1-1 draw.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm optimistically perhaps going to go for a 2-1 win to Reading, but I think this is certainly a sort of battle between Reading and Rotherham that will go right down to the wire at the end of the season. How do you view your survival chances overall?
I think they're better than what a lot of Rotherham fans thought at the beginning of the season. Obviously, the run-in that I mentioned before is an issue, but I could see it going to the last couple of weeks of the season. And yeah, I think Rotherham fans generally are as optimistic as you can be in the circumstances. It looks like it's between maybe 3-4 maximum teams for 2 spots. So yeah, as confident as you can be. Yeah,
no, I think I've said for a while now that I think it will be Bolton and Ipswich, and then either one of Reading or Rotherham. So certainly get a sense that this is a crucial game, really. But my thanks then to you, Richard, for joining me on The View from the Town End. Once again, all the best at the weekend and for the rest of the season. I will point out that this is the second time we're recording this tonight because the first audio file corrupted, so that's much appreciated as well.
Not a problem, Ollie. Cheers.
It's now time then for me and Tom to discuss Reading's team news ahead of the weekend and pick our preferred lineups for the game.
Get social with the boys.
Find them on Twitter
at the Tilehurst End
and facebook.com/the Tilehurst End.
Team news time then here on the Tilehurst End weekend preview ahead of Reading versus Rotherham. Obviously, there are a few concerns against Sheffield United last weekend. Tom, obviously, Andy Rinomhota missed out again for injury, and Liam Kelly had to come off in the first half due to an injury as well. How are both of those shaping up, and any more returnees ahead of the weekend?
So yeah, obviously the one I think most people will be talking about is Andy Rinomhota, and it sounds like he's probably going to miss it again with ankle problem. I don't think there's any real timescale exactly yet, but he's not been training and still nursing that injury. So I think they're planning without him, it sounds like, which it obviously causes the same sort of issues we had when we were talking about it this time last week. But so Kelly and Ajaria both went off last week at Sheffield United. I think ankle injuries. They're both back in training now. It sounds like Kelly may be a little bit touch and go, and that he only came back to training on Thursday. I think Ajari's been back a bit earlier, so Kelly might not be fully ready to start. But I think Ajari should be fine. And then the other one, Tyler Blackett, missed the game at Sheffield United. He's with a hamstring problem, I think it was, and he's back in training and he's fine to play. So that's the sort of the latest on those guys, and then the rest are still out long term, including Saeed Zattel. I've heard a lot of questions about him, but it sounds like he's going to miss the remainder of the season. He's not been in training at all since Gomez came in, and he's I think it's a hip quad problem that the last I heard, and it's just taken a long time to clear up, and it sounds like he's not going to be involved for certainly the next couple of months. So that's the sort of the update there, and then the other couple more still missing longer term. But I think obviously the big one is Rinomhota, and luckily Kelly and Ajaria look like they're back in contention, maybe quicker than first feared.
A bit disappointing that actually about Eza Talahi, obviously came in towards the beginning of the season after his loan, and I think did quite well, but it is a bit of a shame, especially with the team sort of needing that defensive cover, that he won't be available until the end of the season. But of course, some good news on those returnees in Ajaria, Blackett and Kelly. With all of that in mind then, Tom, what would your starting 11 be against Rotherham?
So I'd have obviously Martinez in goal, then Yadom, Moore, Miazga, and then bring Blackett in, I think, for Richards. I think more his aerial threat for one thing will be quite important, I think, but I'd bring him back in if he's fully fit. And then in terms of midfield, not a huge amount of option really. I think Swift and Ajaria probably as a 2, and then Baker maybe as the number 10, as I think was against Blackburn for some of the game at least. And then you go further forward, obviously Oliveira up front, and I'd have Barrow and Mate on the wings. So obviously that's the only real, I think, conundrum who to play out on the wings. I think everywhere else at the moment with the injuries pretty much sort of seems to pick itself, which is I guess quite nice for the manager. But I think I'd go with Barrow and Mate on this occasion.
Certainly a lot different to earlier in the season when there was perhaps too many options to choose from. But I've gone for a slightly different approach. Some might say a controversial approach, but I've gone for Martinez in goal. Actually, I've gone for a back 5 for a bit more defensive cover. So Yedom and Blackett if he's fit at full back, if not Omar Richards. And then 3 centre backs in the form of Moore, Miazga, and I'd bring back in John O'Shea I think his key strength is sort of winning aerial battles, so I'd perhaps have him in there to try and counter that threat from Rotherham. I then have a midfield three of Swift, Ajari, and Baker, and with one of them I'd probably have Lewis Baker sitting a little bit deeper. And then I go with two up front in the shape of Nelson Oliveira. And then it's probably a toss-up, really, I suppose, between Bodvarsson and Mate, but I'd probably say that Bodvarsson might just edge it. I think Mate had a pretty poor game against Sheffield United last week. Well, obviously, most players had a pretty poor game, but I think Mate wasn't particularly impressive against Sheffield United, so I'd probably bring in Bodvarsson for this one. But I suppose the main thing for me, Tom, that I touched upon there is that, sort of how to make the team more solid at the back, obviously without Andy Rinomhota in there. And as I say, I've gone with five at the back. I don't think Jose Gomez will do that. I imagine he'll stick to his preferred system with a 4-2-3-1 that you've gone with. But obviously that's just the way that I would perhaps shake things up. But you've gone with the two holding midfielders in Swift and Ajari, and it is an interesting point because obviously conceding 4 last weekend, as we've touched upon, is concerning in any manner. But I think obviously again, do you need to be that concerned against Rotherham, who have scored the second fewest away goals this season? Obviously, you might want to be attacking them a little bit more than you would have been against Sheffield United last weekend.
Yeah, I think there's some logic to it. Obviously, they say with the aerial threat they pose. I think O'Shea, remember, was it Hull maybe back earlier in the season when he headed away pretty much everything that came his way. But like you said, I personally don't see Gomez going down that route. It's something that was sort of put to him today. What are you going to do with the midfield if Rinomhota's still out? And he said, how did Andy Rinomhota play against Blackburn? And he said he didn't play and they won. So he's not. He seems to think that they can get by without him with the players that they've got in there already. He played Richards as sort of a left winger that day for a bit of extra security on that side, so they could do that again, I suppose. But obviously you would imagine that Rotherham wouldn't offer the same attacking threat as Sheffield United would do. I think that's pretty fair to say, but it's going to be still plenty of threat that they're going to offer in different ways, and having O'Shea in there would probably help with that. But then it's when you go forwards, would Reading have enough to break down what is no doubt going to be a tightly packed defence? And I think you'd want to have a few more attacking options on the pitch to try and do that. And obviously with Mate over Bodvarsson, that's just because I haven't played on the wing. I don't really fancy Bodvarsson as a winger, so I think Mate would fit in there despite not playing particularly well in the last couple of games. But it does make some sense, and I think some people would maybe quite like to see a back three just to help out the fact they haven't got a defensive midfielder. But like I said, I would be quite surprised if Gomez did go down that route.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree. That's just the way that'd be my potential solution to the problem. But again, how much of a problem is it really against the Rotherham side? But one name, of course, who we haven't mentioned is Sonny Aluko, who is set to complete a move away from Reading to join Chinese side Beijing Ren. I think on the whole, this does seem like a pretty good move. I think obviously Aluko's been pretty disappointing for much of his time at Reading since arriving from Fulham 18 months ago. Just 4 goals in 60 appearances, which is a really poor record for someone who was signed for the fee that he was. I think would it perhaps have been best? Obviously, we mentioned the lack of options in the midfield at the moment. Would it perhaps have been best to keep him until the end of the season? And obviously, especially with Rinomhota and as a Talahi both out injured. I mean, the 3 that we've both picked, Swift, Baker, and Ajari, are almost a default 3 at the moment. I mean, obviously, although I know Gomez has hinted that he may promote a player from the academy potentially.
Yeah, I think obviously in an ideal world you would leave it to the summer, but it's just not the way it sort of works out. And I asked Jose Gomez about this a bit today, and that obviously Aluko was in his team, and suddenly he's a player lighter now, which can never be an ideal situation. But he said when you look at the whole picture, it's good financially for the club, and that with Aluko here, it blocks the path for someone else to come through from the 23s. So that hints that he's going to give somebody else a bit more of a chance. I think that was a lot of the idea of trimming the squad in the January window, and I think they've had a couple of under-23s training with the first team this week. You wouldn't sort of say who they were, and said the chances are they might not start on the weekend, but the thinking is there to bring these guys in. I think when you look at potential names, I guess Ryan East, Josh Barrett, a couple that spring to mind. Barrett's played for the first team before, and East was on the bench at Old Trafford, so they're the two midfield options you'd probably think of. But in terms of Aluko, like you say, it is now an option less, and I think he was playing a bit better since Gomez came in. It seemed to suit him a little bit better, but his last couple of appearances under him weren't great, and when that move comes about, it's probably financially good for Reading, probably quite good for Aluko as well, and it just seems to, obviously the timing not ideal, but that's just the way it's worked out. I think Reading had to really go for it. I don't think they're going to get that sort of offer again probably in the summer. So yeah, I can understand why they have decided to let him move on, just despite the lack of numbers maybe in midfield.
Obviously, Beijing Ren, of course, owned by Dai Yong and Dai Zhuli, the same brother and sister that own Reading. So it'll be interesting to see sort of what the implications are there. But we'll finish this discussion then on the team, sort of with a brief point on tactics. I mean, we touched upon it briefly earlier, but obviously last weekend we certainly saw the downside of this possession style of play, especially with Sheffield United's second goal. When Martinez in goal played a dangerous pass out to Liam Kelly, who was sort of muscled off the ball. And Sheffield United ended up scoring from it, I think, as well. I mean, I think, the style of play in general gets very mixed reviews. I mean, it did understand it, and it is under Jose Gomez, but I think obviously some people saying it's perhaps not fit for a relegation battle, but I suppose, that's the sort of thing we'll find out this weekend.
Yeah, I didn't have huge concerns with that second goal, just because I think that's bound to happen at some point when you play that way. Obviously, it's not an ideal time when you're in a relegation battle and you're 1-0 down already to a promotion team, and then you go 2-0 down for a goal like that. It pretty much kills the game. But I think that is bound to happen, and it's something that they're going to have to work on, and you will get better in time. And obviously they don't have time really on their side, but as Gomez said today, they don't have the players really to play another way. Obviously they could do in theory, like you say, bring in O'Shea and put Bob Barson up front with Oliveira, but I don't think that's how he feels that they can create chances, and it'll be a bit more a lottery of whether you win the headers and the knockdowns, and I don't think that's the way Gomez sees his philosophy. So they've got the players in there to play that way. Obviously they've got to perfect it a lot better than they did at Sheffield United, but hopefully they've got some of those mistakes out in that game rather than this weekend. And I think some of the teams that they play in the next few weeks probably maybe won't press quite as high for 90 minutes, and they might give them a few more chances to play out a little bit. So it is always going to cause issues. Like you said, it did understand as well, and it's always going to, some fans are going to want it to be a bit different as it was perhaps, but then obviously it was a bit different under Paul Clement, and they still weren't getting the results that way either. So you've got to sort of go with the players that you've got, and I think the quality, like we said earlier, that Reading have got in their team, they're okay. They are capable of playing decent football, and that's probably the best way to try and go about it at the moment. They've got a few results doing it, and I think if they persist with it over the next few weeks, I think we'll see that they'll pick up the points to just about stay up. But it's going to be probably a bit closer than everyone hoped it might be. But then longer term, hopefully, you look at obviously going into next season, what have you. If all does go well, it's probably best for the long term. But right now you can see why some people might have a few concerns, especially after the problems they had up at Sheffield last week.
Prediction time then. Both of us picked up a point last weekend for saying that Reading would get beat to Bramall Lane. Not quite as heavily as it turned out to be, but what are you going to go for this weekend in a big game against Rotherham, Tom?
I think it's going to be not particularly great to watch at times, probably quite ugly and quite nervy, but I think Reading are going to edge it 2-1, and I think it's going to be a bit of a clinging on at the end possibly, but I think they are just about going to get through at 2-1, and hopefully that's a massive confidence booster for the couple of games coming up. So we'll go for a win, and fingers crossed maybe for it though.
This is the second week in a row that I'm going to go for the same prediction as you. Again, not copying, although I mean it wouldn't be very wise to copy. You could,
exactly.
I don't think you've got one correct or exactly correct all season, but I think I think we will have just about enough to overcome Rotherham. But if we haven't sorted out the defensive issues, then I reckon they might get a goal. So I'm going to go for a 2-1 win to Reading as well. I mean, if the worst does happen and Reading do lose, how much of a threat does this relegation suddenly become? Obviously, we mentioned that we've still got 2 more big games coming up after this. Yeah,
it's become a massive threat. Of course it does. They'll be down into the bottom 3, having just lost at home against Rotherham. I think the mood will quickly change then. It's been quite positive considering the position and the results towards the new regime, if you like, and the new players that have come in. But if they lose at home to Rotherham and they're in the bottom 3, then suddenly I think quite a few fans will start to turn and wonder exactly what's going on. And again, all the pressure will then be on the game at Ipswich, where they'll probably have to go there and win. Otherwise, they could find themselves cut over a drift pretty quickly. So, it's massive in that sense. That's why it is such a big game, because if it does go wrong, then the repercussions, obviously they won't be down or anything like that. But like I said, the games they've got coming up towards the end of the season are far from straightforward ones. And I think this game and next week, those two maybe in particular, if they can just win this one, I think that could set them up well for the couple that come up afterwards. But if they lose it, then it's bound to give a massive confidence knock to the team, especially with Gomez saying at every opportunity how it's the biggest game of the season. So if you lose that, then that's bound to cause you a few issues sort of confidence-wise if you've lost the biggest game. So, yeah, it's going to be a massive one. And like I say, I'm not sure it'll be maybe particularly great at times to watch, but hopefully they can just about get over the line and yeah, then on to the next one with a 3-point cushion.
Well, hopefully a defeat won't be something that Mark will have to discuss on the main podcast when it returns after the Rotherham game. I think probably Sunday or Monday is tending to do them at the moment, so that's when that show will be in your feeds. Tom and I will then be back to preview another clash, as mentioned, against the relegation rival, bottom of the table Ipswich Town, at this time next week. There is also always plenty of content over on the tilehurstend.com. We've got lots of preview for this Rotherham game, and we'll also have a full report and ratings as ever as well. Up on the site as well at the moment is our manager and owner approval ratings, which are your chance sort of to how to rank how you feel both Jose Gomez and the Chinese owners are doing at the moment from 1 to 5. I think we're announcing results to that next week, so head over to the tilehurstend.com to have your say on that one. On a similar note, Tom, what can we look forward to on the working paper in the next week or so?
Yeah, so like I say, it's all on the game at the weekend. We spoke with Gomez and Matt Miazga today, so there'll be stuff up from them in the next couple of days and going into next week. And then, yeah, obviously all the report reaction video from the game on Saturday. And then we also got report and LB reaction from the women's game last night, Wednesday night. Women lost against West Ham at Madejski as well, so there'll be stuff up about that over on workingpaper.com and as usual on my Twitter, Tom J. Crocker.
Fantastic stuff. Make sure you go and check all of that out over on the Working Paper and on Twitter as well. All that's left for me to say then, Tom, is thank you very much for joining me on the Tilehurst End weekend preview once again this week.
Thank you very much. Hopefully first prediction going to come right this weekend. I'm feeling fairly confident.
I certainly hope so as well. I mean, as always, a big thank you to you at home for listening. Here's hoping that the most important game of our season turns into the most important win of our season. Come on, you ours.
The Tilehurst End podcast by Reading fans for Reading fans.